Imagine a creature that knows nothing but trust. A creature that looks at a human and sees a protector. Now, imagine that trust being shattered in the most brutal way possible. This is the true story of Buddy, a gentle cat from the streets of Philadelphia who became the victim of a crime so chilling, it felt like a scene from a horror movie. Two teenagers, two bloodthirsty dogs, and a defenseless cat caught in a trap of pure malice. As Buddy lay there, his small body broken and his eyes filled with a silent scream, he didn't just fight for his life, he unknowingly started a revolution that would change the laws of a nation forever. You might want to grab a tissue, because what happened to Buddy and the justice that followed will haunt you long after this video ends. A morning like no other. The sun rose over Philadelphia on an ordinary Tuesday, casting long, golden shadows across the brick row houses of Frankfurt. For Buddy, a gentle black and white stray, the world was a friendly place. He didn't have a permanent home with a locked door, but he had a neighborhood. He was the community cat, the one who would wait on porches for a scrap of food, the one who would purr against the ankles of strangers, trusting that every human hand was meant for petting, not for pain. But on this day, the air felt different. There was a coldness creeping through the alleyways that had nothing to do with the weather. Buddy was resting on a familiar porch, his eyes half closed, soaking in the fleeting warmth of the morning sun. He didn't know that miles away, a dark intention was brewing. He didn't know that his capacity for trust was about to become his greatest curse. The arrival of the predators. Then came the sound, the heavy, rhythmic panting of powerful lungs and the metallic jingle of heavy chains hitting the pavement. Two teenagers turned the corner. In their hands, they held the leashes of two massive pit bull dogs bred for power, now being used for malice. The boys stopped. They didn't see a living, breathing soul on that porch. They saw a target. They saw a prop for a sick game they wanted to play. As they approached the porch, Buddy didn't run. He didn't hiss. He looked up with those wide, amber eyes, perhaps expecting a treat or a kind word. His innocence was absolute. The moment the world broke. "Get him?" one of the boys whispered, a chilling smile spreading across his face. With a sudden jerk, the leashes were loosened. The boys began to cheer, their voices high and mocking, as they egged the dogs on. The pit bulls, acting on instinct and the command of their masters, lunged onto the porch. The silence of the neighborhood was shattered by a sound that would haunt the witnesses for years, the desperate, high-pitched scream of a cat who realized, too late, that he was being hunted. Buddy tried to scramble under the porch railing, his small claws scratching frantically at the wood. But there was no escape. The dogs clamped down, one on his hind legs, the other on his neck. The teenagers didn't pull the dogs back. They didn't panic. They stood there, recording the carnage on their phones, laughing as Buddy's small body was tossed around like a rag doll. The sad state wasn't just the physical blood, it was the look in Buddy's eyes as he looked toward the boys, a silent plea for the humans he trusted to make it stop. But they only laughed louder, left for dead. The aftermath of cruelty. When the boys finally grew bored of the show, they whistled for their dogs and calmly walked away, leaving a trail of blood on the sidewalk. They left Buddy behind, broken and mangled. He lay there in a pool of his own blood. His jaw was shattered, his internal organs were failing, and his fur was matted with saliva and dirt. He was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Every breath was a battle. He was alone. The neighborhood was quiet again, but the porch was now a crime scene of unimaginable cruelty. Hours passed. The sun began to set and the temperature dropped. Buddy's body went into shock. He was a tiny soul drifting between this world and the next, wondering why the world had suddenly turned so cold. Hours had passed since the two teenagers vanished with their dogs, leaving behind a silence more deafening than their laughter. Buddy lay precisely where he had fallen, a small, black and white form nearly invisible against the shadows of the porch. His body was cold, entering the final, mercy-filled stages of shock. He was no longer screaming. He didn't have the strength to weep. Only the shallow, erratic rising and falling of his chest proved he was still fighting, a tiny spark refusing to be extinguished in the dark. It was a neighbor, returning from an errand, who saw the blood first. Following the red trail up the stairs, they gasping in horror at the sight of Buddy. His injuries were so severe that, at first glance, they thought he was already gone. When the tiny cat let out a sound, not a meow, but a low, wet gurgle of absolute distress, the neighbors sprang into action. They didn't just see a stray. They saw the gentle spirit of their street broken by malice. Tenderly, carefully, knowing that even a gentle touch might cause him agony, they wrapped Buddy in a soft towel and rushed him to the only place that might save him, the Pennsylvania Spec, the trauma room battle. The doors of the emergency veterinary clinic burst open. The atmosphere shifted instantly from routine to crisis. Veterinary technicians, accustomed to tragedy, were visibly shaken as the towel was unwrapped. The sheer brutality of the attack was evident in every wound. Buddy's jaw was fractured, making eating or drinking impossible. Puncture wounds from the dog's teeth dotted his entire body, many deep enough to threaten vital organs. The physical trauma was immense, but the psychological trauma was worse. Buddy was tensed, expecting more pain with every touch, his eyes wide and vacant. "He shouldn't be alive," one veterinarian whispered, looking at the x-rays. The PSPCA medical team began a desperate, around-the-clock battle. They administered heavy pain medication to make the suffering bearable. They set intravenous lines for fluids and antibiotics to fight off the infection that was already setting in. They cleaned his wounds, but the deepest injuries required complex, delicate surgeries that his fragile body might not survive. The question hanging in the sterile air wasn't if he was in pain, he was living in a hellscape of agony, but whether his spirit had the will to endure the long, grueling road to recovery. They named him Buddy officially, giving him an identity, transforming him from a victim into a patient, a fighter, a symbol. Chapter 6. The Digital Revolution of Rage. While the medical team fought for Buddy's life in the quiet of the clinic, a digital storm was gathering force. Neighbors had checked their home security cameras. The graininess of the CCTV footage did nothing to hide the horror. The entire attack, the premeditation, the cheering boys, the vicious dogs, the suffering of the cat was captured on video. A neighbor posted a segment of the video on social media, appealing for help in identifying the perpetrators. They didn't know they were lighting a fuse. The response was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The video went viral not just in Philadelphia, but across the United States. It bypassed normal channels and exploded directly into the consciousness of millions. This wasn't just animal cruelty. This was a visual representation of pure evil. People who had never met a community cat felt a personal connection to the broken creature in the hospital bed. They saw their own pets in Buddy. The hashtag number, Justice for Buddy, began to trend on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Comment sections became battlegrounds of grief and fury. How could anyone do this? We must find them. They need to pay. The outrage was fueled by the release of photographs from the PSPCA. These images showed Buddy covered in bandages, his face swollen, his body tiny against the large medical equipment. These photos didn't just ask for sympathy, they demanded action. The manhunt begins. The pressure on the Philadelphia Police Department and the PSPCA Humane Law Enforcement Team became immense. This was no longer a routine animal control issue. It was the top priority for a city, a state, and a nation demanding justice. Tips began pouring in. Detectives spent hours analyzing the grainy CCTV video. They mapped out the suspect's route. They looked at the breed and specific appearance of the dogs. They analyzed the voices and language used. Every resource was deployed. But it was the internet that broke the case open. Armchair detectives, motivated by intense empathy for Buddy, began cross-referencing the video suspects with local social media profiles. They looked for matching clothing, specific tattoos, and the dogs. Within days, names began to circulate, then addresses. The suspects were teenagers, minors, which added a complex layer of anger to the public response. If they do this as children, people asked, what will they do as adults? The PSPCA issued a formal statement. They were following strong leads, but the public wanted immediate arrests. They wanted to know that the monsters who had tortured Buddy were behind bars, unable to hurt another living soul. The price of a soul. As the investigation intensified, Buddy's medical battle became touch and go. Some days, he showed a slight appetite, his amber eyes regaining a flicker of light. The veterinary staff, who had fallen in love with him, would celebrate these tiny victories. They would talk to him softly, pet him with a single finger, trying to override his trauma with human kindness.